Are you a business owner looking for real advice and input? You're in the right place. From concept to launch to growth, funding, and beyond. Welcome to Startup Hustle with your hosts. One once sold a business for $150 million. The other, the author of $1 Million Bedroom. Here are your hosts of Startup Hustle, Matt DeCoursey and Matt Watson.
1, 2, 3, 4, 3, 2, 1. 'Cause no one can do it like we do it, like we do it, like we do it.
And we're back. Another episode of Startup Hustle. Matt DeCoursey here with Chris Costello, who'll be sitting in for Matt Watson today. Chris, what's up?
How you doing, man? Thanks for having me.
I appreciate you coming by. And how am I doing? I'm doing pretty well.
Good.
Doing pretty well. Yeah,
You look good.
Thank you. Thank you. And considering that we haven't met before today,
There's no frame of reference.
I'm going to just take that for what it is, which is a nice thing to say.
Well, you bettered my expectations. How about that?
I'll go with that, too. I feel like my wife needs to hear that part.
Yeah,
I'm like, hey.
me too.
Yeah, okay. Well, you look great, too.
My love language is words of affirmation. So in this podcast, if you can, say nice things to me, like you get more out of me too.
Okay. Well, Chris, you have built a beautiful company.
There you go.
And we're going to talk all about that. Now, before we get into that, today's episode of Startup Hustle is brought to you by Fullscale.io. We can help you build a software development team quickly and affordably. For those of you listening, you know I want you to be interactive. So I want you to go to Blooom, BLOOOM.com. That is the company where Mr. Chris Costello is the co-founder and better known as Blooom or blooom.com. Did I mention Blooom?
Yeah, maybe.
Okay,
Yeah,
so there's a third O.
Yeah,
There's a third O.
Third O is important.
Yeah, and we're going to talk all about that. And as we get into it, Chris, you wanted to give us a quick intro and tell us what's the problem you guys are solving over at Blooom?
Sure, I'd be happy to. This is one of the best parts of my role at Blooom is to get to tell the story about the problem that we're solving and the reason behind starting the company. The why at Blooom is huge for us. Why we're trying to build this company. The whole story really kind of goes back to, if I could set the stage, before Blooom, I worked in wealth management and typically worked with people that had significantly large portfolios, usually at least $500,000 or more. There was something that kind of constantly nagged at me in those years before Blooom. I've been in the business since 1995. Started as a stockbroker. They don't even call people that anymore, but that's what we were called back in the mid-90s. But I was always bothered by the fact that wealth managers, financial advisors generally only want to help people that have a decent chunk of assets. And I don't fault them. I didn't fault myself for necessarily targeting that demographic because there's only a certain number of hours in the day as a financial advisor you can help people. And it's like, do you want to help 10 people a day that have got 10 grand, or do you want to help 10 people a day that at least have $1 million in their portfolio to invest? And it bothered me because my own mom and dad actually wouldn't have qualified to get in the door of a financial advisor. And the other thing that we saw over and over before Blooom was how many of my colleagues, my friends, my neighbors, when they'd ask me for help on this thing that they had through work called a 401k1, they'd sometimes even mispronounce it, and I'd say, you mean a 401k? Yeah. And they'd say, I have no idea what I'm doing with this thing. There's money coming out of my paycheck and it's going into this account, but I have no idea like what I'm supposed to pick in that thing. And they'd ask me to take a look at it, and it just seemed like over and over and over, I'd look at my friends' 401ks just kind of doing them a favor, and they had completely screwed it up. Like it was a jumbled mess of random investments.
Yeah, they give you a sheet with like 8 options on it, and then want you to place what could be your most valuable asset later.
Which
make that decision.
Yeah,
on a couple quick check marks.
Well, actually, and it's not. I mean, it's not terribly hard. But what I would see over and over is like, clearly it'd be like a young person that had all their money sitting in a money market or something.
Yeah.
And so really the impetus behind Blooom was around a desire to build something leveraging technology to help people with these really, really important accounts. Because if you think these people listening to this podcast, if they're not going to sell a business for millions of dollars, if they're not going to win the lottery, if they're not going to inherit a bunch of money, the fact of the matter is that most people are going to need their workplace 401k to do well enough to allow them at some point to stop working. So the stakes are huge. And we wanted to build a technology to address that problem. This massive segment of the market that didn't have enough money to get in the door to a financial advisor, didn't want to take the time to go to a financial advisor's office, didn't really want to take the time to figure it out themselves, but know that they needed to get this thing right. And that's what Bloom is helping people with today.
Yeah, and that, you talk about 401k. I mean, that's something that it's really common and also very misunderstood. I have found that interesting, and as someone that owns a business, and I've had a lot of employees over the years, people will come to me as the business owner.
Right.
And they'll be like, "What should
That's
I put this in?" I'm like,
Yes.
You know what? I can't tell you because I
Right.
don't know, and
Right.
I hate giving financial advice to people.
Well, it's good that you
Because,
recognize that.
well, and there's a reason for that. Is well, if it turns to shit, then they're gonna blame me. And then if it goes really well, they probably would just be like, "Oh, cool, I was expecting that."
Yeah.
And it's like, but here's the thing: I'm not a licensed dealer or broker or vendor of financial services. I understand some of it, but it's not what I do.
Yeah. There's some things in life that are okay to DIY. We joke sometimes there are probably some people that still change their own car oil. It's
Not me.
But like things that are of like huge importance, like your future financial security, people should not be forced to DIY it. If you don't have enough money to get an advisor and you're really not confident in your own ability, it shouldn't be the only option where you just have to figure it out. And that's basically what we've done at this point, is we've given people the tools to save money through their employer. You've given them a packet of information, maybe a website to go to, and it's just not enough to properly arm these people to do well with these accounts.
Yeah, part of it is you look at all this different stuff you can invest in. You mentioned hiring a broker or a money management person. You said, well, they only want to deal with these high net worth individuals. Well, they get paid on commission. That's why
some do.
But that's overwhelmingly why the bigger money gets more attention, right?
That's right. Well, I mean, a lot of models these days are fee based, where you might pay 1%. So it's like if you're an advisor and you've got a choice to work with somebody with $1 million, 1% is going to pay you $10,000 a year, or somebody with $10,000, that 1% will pay you $100 a year. I mean, it's easy math at this point.
But either way, that's a commission, as I see it. I mean, commission could be.
Well, it clearly
the fee based, right?
It drives behavior. It drives financial advisors to focus on the wealthy people, and it's I would argue that people with smaller accounts need access to advisors more.
Yeah, no, you're right. Because, I mean, it's the same way, like, when you look at it from an investment standpoint, and, we're here on Startup Hustle, which, by the way, if you want to also see pretty pictures of Chris and I later, you can go to the @Startup Hustle Instagram account.
It's the whole reason I wore my green blue sweatshirt.
You're looking good.
I knew I would be on camera.
And intuitively, the Startup Hustle logo sign is matching your shirt.
Perfect.
I love your logo, by the way. I love it. It looks like a tulip with a dollar sign in the middle of it.
That's exactly what it is.
I'm kind of crushing on the logo, I'm not going to lie. So, and you talk about, well, there's a very popular book, and it's been a documentary. It's called Freakonomics. I'm sure you've read it. But it kind of, what you're mentioning seems like the kind of thing that Freakonomics would point out in some regards. Like, you have the wealthiest people ever, and they get the most attention, they get the best advice on how to get richer, and then the people that need the advice don't have access to it, and it's just one of those weird little misnomers. Now, this is even an acknowledged thing when it comes to startups, because if you have a high enough net worth or you make enough money, you can actually, then you're an accredited investor too, and you can sidestep different certain types. You can invest in startups and software and do a whole lot of different things that a non-high net worth person can get into. But the reason is most of the people that have acquired that net worth are a little more sophisticated in their understanding of financial matters. Now, some of them might have just inherited the dough.
Right.
I mean, sure, that happens, but at the same time, like, that's why that exists and why it's there. But once again, here's access to some, well, these are high risk, but also potentially high return. Things. So the system is a little bit tilted.
I read an interesting article along those lines, and what you're seeing, that companies are staying private longer. Okay, like the really successful startups that we read all about
Oh, yeah.
are staying private longer.
Or
And
going back to private.
right, and the problem is that is oftentimes, if you think back to companies like, let's use a over cliched, stock that made a lot of people a lot of money, Microsoft back in the 80s.
Never heard of them.
They were a publicly traded company, and so individual investors, small investors, at least had a shot
Yeah.
to put money into that company as a very early stage. And now if these companies are staying private longer, the only people that get to invest in the early stage, like you say, are these accredited investors.
Actually, it's more like the ultra elite, because
Right.
the accredited investor is almost like I mean, technically you are one, but
And
the
where does-
people that are putting money into you, like you say, where does the SoftBank's gazillion-dollar investment fund come from? People that are so freaking rich that they're like, man, what am I going to do with this $1 billion?
Yeah. And
Here
where
you
does
go,
where
Chris.
does where does most
Spend
of
it
the,
wisely.
Where does most of the return come from? It's in the early
Yeah.
days of those companies too.
Now, with that also comes risk, and I don't want to
Sure.
just. And by the way, I should point out once again, I'm not a broker of financial services. Are you? Are you actually like a? Are you?
Bloom is a registered investment advisor. So
Are you
absolutely.
personally as well?
Yes.
You
Oh,
said
yeah.
you were in the
Certi-
past. Yeah.
Certified financial planner. Yep.
By the way, that's important to remember, and that's another reason. Like, I really do tell people that I'll leave that same disclaimer, even in I've done that in my books too. I'm like, hey, look, this isn't what I do. This is an opinion. So you got to make your own decision. Now, with that, with 401k, you have people making a lot of wonky decisions.
Yeah.
And the funny thing is too, it's like most people just don't understand that stuff. And so some of these sheets they'll give you, like they're like, here's your prospectus, and it just shows you what the return was for the last 3 years. That doesn't have any. That doesn't tell you if
And guess
or what.
Guess what is oftentimes the most commonly used metric to determine what's going to do well in the future?
The name.
Past performance, which is
Sure.
oftentimes a terrible.
Yeah, that's my point with
indicator.
that. And then sometimes the name.
Yeah.
Like people are like, oh, this is aggressive, or this is not.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, some of that depends on. Okay, so with Bloom, we have wealth management technology. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, focused on retirement savings.
Sure. So what you do now? So now we have an idea of what the problem is. How do you go about solving this? Like, what is Bloom going to do for me? How do I access that other than going to bloomwith3os.com?
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, essentially, and this is what I love about technology when it's used for good, is that we are leveraging technology to democratize access to financial advisor professional money management that previously oftentimes you needed a fairly decent sized portfolio to gain access to. I think about the clients at my other firm before Bloom, were all well off and they got access to really high quality professional money management. And now with technology, we can build services and algorithms that perfectly repeat good professional sound asset allocation, optimizing your portfolio over and over and over for anyone, regardless of their account size. Doesn't matter where you work. It doesn't matter where your 401k is at. We can help you wherever you work, essentially. And the way you do that is just go to the Bloom site. The whole start to finish, what I'm about to tell you, if you went to the Bloom site and did everything I'm about to tell you, it will take you less than 5 minutes. And the hardest question we will ask you in that process is, when do you think you might want to retire? That might be the one you have to think the most about.
Is yesterday an option?
Yeah, exactly.
Does it all have to be future dates?
Right. Well,
I should have already done this by now. What have I done wrong?
Right. And I'm sure that's the case for some folks.
So the algorithm doesn't account for guilt and shaming for past bad financial decisions?
I'm actually glad you brought that up. That's
I was kind of serious about that
No,
on
no.
some level.
Yeah,
like,
no.
Understanding what you did wrong to not repeat it is kind of why we take history class too.
I actually think that's a reason why a lot of people have kind of disengaged in their own personal finances, because at some point along the way, they went to a website or they spoke to an advisor or somebody came in and bought lunch for the office and talked about investing, and they were made to feel like they were so woefully behind, like you'll never retire type thing. And that is absolutely the furthest thing from what Bloom is going to do. We will help anybody wherever they're at in their stage. And so if you go to the site, you go to Bloom with 3 O's, you click on the Get Started link, in about 3 minutes, you can get a totally free assessment of the health of your account. And maybe if you've had good advice or this is something that comes easy to you, maybe your account's in good shape, and you'll see that. We'll let you know if your overall stock to bond mix is appropriate, because that's the biggest thing to get right.
And that changes over time, right?
It needs to change slightly over
Yeah.
time, but we see a lot of times is younger people that have way too much in conservative stuff, and they're just foregoing massive amounts of growth. So number one,
Right.
let's see if you've got roughly
You have
the
a lot
right
of,
mix.
you're looking at a 30-year, 25-year investment cycle, and you can go up and down. The reason you want to be more conservative at the end is if there's something wild or crazy happens, you don't want to lose 30% of that, like, while you're 70, right?
Yeah, you want to get slightly more conservative when you get closer to needing the money. But yeah, the average age of a Bloom client's like 36 or 37, so they probably have 2 decades-ish
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
go at least. The second thing we test for is diversification. Do you have, kind of the right mix of things? And that's a simplified way of saying is we want to make sure you don't have too many eggs in too few baskets, using that old saying. The final thing is, and this is probably the coolest part of it, we will show you what you're paying in hidden fees. Almost no one has any clue what their expense ratio is inside their 401k. It's like we joke that the 401k space is like the medical industry, where you go into an office, have no idea what an x-ray costs or a mammogram costs
Until you get your bill.
until you get your bill. Same thing with 401ks. So we will let you know what you're paying in fees.
And that stuff's all public. I mean, it has to be stated,
It just
right?
requires a PhD in finance to be able to figure it out, and do the digging to understand all
Right.
that. And so we'll let you know all of that for free. And I always tell people, like, I don't care if you sign up for Bloom. There's 84 million people in the U.S. that have a 401k right now. They're sitting at work right now that have a 401k or a 403b.
Man,
through
that
their
sounds
employer.
low.
It is low because about half the companies, oftentimes smaller companies, maybe Bob's Plumbing or something, doesn't offer a 401k to their employees, which is a whole nother discussion.
By the way, it's really easy. If you're a startup, it's really easy to offer a 401k, especially if you're already using like a payroll processor, like something like Paychecks. And I'm not saying they have great retirement options or whatever. Maybe Bloom can help you figure that out. But, the government gives you a credit back for setting up a 401k. I think is it still $900 or something like that? But it doesn't, it covers what you're going to cost to set it up.
This was an excuse that was appropriate 5 or 10 years ago. These days, the cost and simplicity of offering a 401k have come way down.
Yeah, but even as a business owner, so I own a couple different businesses, and I got a 401k. It's actually one of the ways that I've piled in some money over time or whatever, and then actually it's been useful because I've leveraged it. Now, not something I recommend for everyone, but I'm a leverage kind of guy. Now I've got some more experience with it. I don't think that's for the faint of heart. I like buying stock in myself. So I'm not like, yeah, did you see what IBM did today?
Right.
I'm like, hey, did you see we grew this amount? But yeah, but it's easy to do it, and do it for yourself too, because one of the things as a business owner, it's about what you keep. Like this has a lot to do with it, and it's not all. This is an agreed thing. Your profit in the end and your enterprise value is based on like what have you acquired? What has this done for you? What has this done for your life? What has this done for your business? And here's the thing: is the thing that some people don't understand about a 401k is you get to put this money in investment vessels, and you're not paying tax on it on the way in. That's the big plus of the 401k.
Well,
pay 30. Well, hopefully you pay 40% in taxes because you're making that much money because you're awesome at what you do, and then you have even more of a reason because you don't pay that tax on the way out.
Here's a real simple way to explain that. So the benefit you're referring to is being able to save money in your 401k pre-tax.
Yeah.
And so let's say, and I'm just using this for round number sake. Let's say your income was $100,000. Today, if you do not participate in the 401k at all, you're going to get taxed on $100,000. You have the ability today to save in an account that is in your name, that you own, that you get to keep forever, up to about 19 grand, like 19,500.
Is that what it's up to now?
Roughly. So
per year?
Again, just so to keep the math simple, let's call that 20 grand for now.
Sure.
You can save up to 20 grand. So if you took advantage of that, your income's 100 grand, but you took 20 grand and put it into an account in your name that you own forever, and now the government only taxes you on $80,000.
Yep.
So what were you going to pay in taxes on the difference between that 80 and 100? And that's what you save by saving into your 401k. So getting back to the thing that Bloom does, so this free analysis that I was starting to say that everybody in America that's got one of these accounts should take 3 or 4 minutes and at least get the free assessment.
Yeah, sure.
And then if you decide, you know what, it does look like there are some ways where I could improve my 401k, then you can sign up and have Bloom manage that for you. So what does that mean? What does it mean to sign up and have Bloom manage it for you, which takes another minute or two? The way you pay Bloom is on a straight flat fee basis. The entire wealth management business charges percentages and basis points. We wanted to make this fair and simple. A lot of people are used to subscription-based model, Amazon Prime, Netflix. Bloom charges $120 per year, regardless of your account size.
$10 a month.
About $10 a month to professionally manage this for you. And so we will go in to your 401k. Remember, we can't move the money out of there. While you work at your company, money's got to stay in that 401k. So we'll go into your 401k. We'll look at all the options you could pick from, and we'll optimize it into the lowest cost funds to build an allocation for you. So the allocation needs to be right for your age and time frame to retirement. It needs to be diversified, and we're going to do it at the lowest possible cost. And so generally speaking, when our clients sign up for Bloom, they'll see a reduction in their hidden fees. And these might be fees that they weren't even aware.
Still your money, people.
Yeah, it's like the analogy is like termites in your house. You can't see termites, but if you leave them unchecked, what happens? They wreak havoc on the house.
Yeah,
Same
not
thing with
good.
these fees in your 401k. If left unchecked, they'll add up to a lot of money over the course of a retirement.
It's kind of like you remember when you were a kid, someone, you're like, hey, how about you give me a penny today and 2 pennies tomorrow? And that very quickly turns into this stupid amount of money.
Yes.
And it's the same thing like compound interest and the different stuff. So these fees that get shaved out of your assets is less money to grow later. And if you look at that, what you're like, oh, but it's only a small amount.
Well, let me
where's that going to be in 30 years?
That's it. Let me give you an example. It is not uncommon. If you are, let's say, 30 years old with maybe 30 years of working in front of you, depending on your 401k plan, it is not unusual if we can get in there and lower the fees that you could see over $100,000 of additional value in your account over a 30-year time horizon, just from minimizing fees. Forget the performance of the market. I'm just talking about the thing we can control, which is fee minimum. That's $100,000. That might allow you to stop working a year and a half, a year or two earlier than you thought you would. I mean, that is significant money over a working time frame.
Buy a bigger boat. That's the worst.
Some
worst.
Folks could do that.
So, since you're giving good financial advice, I'm giving the worst financial advice ever, which is actually buy a bigger boat. That might be the worst financial advice ever, isn't it?
Could be. They depreciate quite a bit.
Yeah, it's always a joke that Okay, so
you're the anti-advisor in this.
No,
I
hope not. Please do not associate me with poor advice. That would. Oh man, there's things that you say on the podcast, and then sometimes if you watch you can check us out on the Startup Hustle YouTube channel. You'll sometimes catch my arm literally flying because I'm trying to pull that comment back.
Words. Yes,
that's funny. Anybody who's ever been around boats knows that was a very credible bad advice comment.
You know what the boat stands for, don't you?
Tell me again.
Break out another 1,000.
Yes, yes, I knew it was something. I was trying to think of that.
Or the two happiest days in a boat owner's life: the day they buy
getting
the boat
it and getting rid of it. Yeah. It's I've never owned a boat, and I probably won't. It's funny you talk about different things. Like maybe you should just rent that.
You're right.
Yeah, because you get to give it back at the end along with all the stuff that you ruin. Okay, so any business, any startup, whether it's technology-based, service-based, anything, goes through a process of what I'll say validation. And obviously, you can get some market validation while you're trying to get set up. Now, you guys have clearly reached a level of validation because I believe you've got 25,000 users.
25,000 clients. Yep, 25,000 paying clients. Yep.
And and you have done. Now, we like to just kind of talk about the history of things. You've been doing this 6 or 7 years.
Yeah, we started working on it, and my co-founder Randy. Bloom was founded by myself, Kevin Connard, and Randy Ofterhide, and we started. All three of us had other jobs at the time that we had the idea for Bloom, and so we started to meet in Randy's basement, like on Thursday and Sunday nights, and after the kids went to bed, and we started working on the idea for this. But that was January, kind of the early part of 2013. And then we didn't launch Bloom to the public until the fall of 14. So it's been live out in the wild, if you will, for about 5 years.
5 years, and took you a year to get it out there.
It took about a year and a half
Yeah.
before we were comfortable kind of going public with it. Yep.
Now,
Exactly.
along that path, you've raised $13 million.
Mhm.
What are some of your comments about how that process went? I find that when I run into those of you that are listening, face to face, I get a lot of questions. Well, first off, people ask me what podcast I listen to, so and you don't have to ask. I rarely even listen to this one. But I get a lot of funding questions.
Yeah.
And that's been a popular topic, and I like to, for people that have raised money, I'm hoping you can give a realistic recap of probably how bad it sucked.
Yeah.
But-
Well, a couple things. So Randy, Kevin, and I started off bootstrapping the company for about the first, I guess, a little over a year or so. No, about 2.5 years, because we didn't raise our Series A until the fall of 15. So the company had been alive for about 2.5 years. And fortunately, Randy and Kevin and I were in a position we could do that. And then we raised our first round. It was a Series A of $4 million from institutional, well-established VCs. And then we raised another $9 million about a year and a half later. So a total of $13 million. And I like to tell
same investor both times, or
some of the same investors. Yep, a couple follow-alongs. But I like to tell people that I'm part of the 100 Club. And so what that means is between our Series A and our Series B, I pitched Bloom to over 100 different investors.
Listen to that, people. I mean, that's the thing. You're talking about a company like this. You'd already raised $4 million. Like, let's be real. Like, that puts you on the map. And
but we had,
there's a lot of people that want to invest in you at that point just because you've got $4 million bucks in, and well, you've on many levels reduced your risk a little because someone else put all that money in first. 100 pitches.
Yeah, and if you think about it, like we actually had, when we were raising, we were able to bootstrap. So when we went to raise our first round, we had paying clients. We had won best of show at Finovate, so we had kind of hit the map, and it was still a ton of getting on the phone. I always recommend to people that are entering the world of fundraising that most of this can be done in a go-to-meeting Zoom type format.
Yep.
And then when you get serious interest, then you may need to hop on an airplane. I also tell people, we're sitting here in Kansas City today. There are a ton of wonderful investors in Kansas City, but the fact of the matter is you need to wrap your head around the fact that you're probably going to need to go outside of Kansas City.
Sure.
We raised from firms in New York to Silicon Valley to Atlanta to Chicago. We've got investors in Ohio. I mean, literally all over the U.S. And it is absolutely something that at the time feels like a grind. It's clearly something I'm proud of, because very few companies are ever able to raise capital. I think they say like fewer than 1% of all companies are able to do it.
That's why that 100 number is for those. And by the way, we've had listeners in 190 countries. Who are you people, by the way? Thank you. Really, seriously, thank you. But don't put a geo fence around where people are allowed to be passionate about you. And that's, you just mentioned all the different places that money came from. I mean, you should start local. I mean, why not? Like, if you can drive up the street, I actually went to a meeting this morning. I was running an idea by local VC. I wasn't asking them for money. I know them. I was just like, I'm just curious what you think about this. And, and we drank some coffee and talked about stuff. Yeah. But, that if you can get in front of people like that locally, see what they have to say. But the 100 number is big because it applies to so many different things. You mentioned about 1% actually get funded.
Well,
then you're going to probably, because all these places, they typically see about 100 pitches before they pick one that they like.
Well, think about this. If you let's say it's around 1%. I think I read that somewhere. If you take out companies based in Silicon Valley or companies based in New York, it's like 0.001% of all the rest of the companies that ever get funding.
But people say, why are they there? But they're there because, much like an oasis in the middle of the desert will draw something to it, that's where resources exist. It's not that there's a flaw with Kansas City or Omaha or Austin or wherever you are. It's just these are the pockets of where resource exists. Sure. And that's why people flock to them. It's not, I get into that subject with people in Kansas City, and they're like, well, how do we fix this? Everyone's leaving. I'm like, well, we need to create an incentive or resource-rich environment.
Well, I'll tell you how tell you how you do this. I think this is a way that you recruit and attract talent to Kansas City. I'll share you my idea.
Tell them our barbecue's awesome.
That's part of the story.
That helps.
But so if you're going to go out and try and recruit, let's just say tech talent, for example. If you're going to go out and try and recruit tech talent of a 25-year-old, let's say, who's living in San Fran or living in New York, they're probably loving life at this point, living in a city like that. Now, let's fast forward, though. Somebody who's qualified that's 30 years old, maybe they're married, maybe they're starting to have kids.
Yep.
You can make the case that this is about the best place in the entire country to raise a family. Like, I used to think, like, we should show a house out in the Johnson County, Kansas City area and say, do you realize on the salary that you're going to get, like, this is how much house you can get, and you show that to somebody
this conversation with
in
people
San
all
Francisco
the time.
who's paying $3,000 for 800 square foot.
It's actually up. It's at $3,700 a month average for a one bedroom.
Think of the size of the house they can buy with a lawn, and my kids could walk to some of the best schools in the country, public schools in Blue Valley.
Do you know the best part is I drove to work today and there was no traffic.
It takes me 15 minutes to get to work. Yeah. There's no traffic.
It was nice.
Yeah. So you're not going to be able to pull a single person who's 24 out of New York to come to Kansas City, but maybe a 31-year-old that's thinking about the next chapter of their life. Those are the people that will come and appreciate the lifestyle that we have here and the cost of living.
One of the things that I'm seeing, and I consider myself to be pretty dialed into this culture. Full scale, we're the official development partner of Launch KC now, and that's an economic development committee. They're doing great things. They're bringing, but they don't have boundaries. They partner up with. I don't know if I'm sure you're familiar with Launch KC.
We were one of the $50,000 grant winners back in 2015.
They don't do grants anymore, so they pivoted. So now they found they did clean tech, and they get Black and Veatch to invest $50,000 in 6 different companies and be a top level partner. It's a much improved. By the way, if you want to check it out, go to launchkc.org. We were in San Francisco recently talking to some of the companies that they had partnered with. And every one thing that's universal, and this isn't a pitch for Kansas City, this is a pitch for small market USA. Okay, look, there's this shortage of software programmers. You're probably going to end up with a diversified workforce. They're going to be distributed. Maybe you call full scale and we set you up a team in the Philippines. This means you're mobile, people. You can go. You don't have to embrace the world's most expensive operating cost. Rent a closet and say you're from the Valley. Come run your business in Kansas or Omaha or Oklahoma City or because it's cheap. Yeah. Because it's cheap. It is, and that matters. Like there's no glory in overspending. And and then there's other things too. You just get access to a lot of different stuff, and I totally agree with you. So I've lived all over the country. By the way, I could live anywhere I want. I choose to live here. It's for the reasons you mentioned. I got great public schools.
You are here for the winters.
Yeah, I love that. That's actually why I'm going to our office in the Philippines in a couple of weeks. So that's what you do: is you come move somewhere where it's cold in the winter, and then you open an international company that has a lot of places in warm spots.
There you go.
I always joke with our folks, and the second chapter of my book, $1 Million Bedroom, is titled "It's Always Sunny in Cebu City," which is pretty true. It's like Groundhog Day there, like the movie. It's the same. It's 74 to 92 every day, like every day, all year. Actually, this week it was 77 to 87.
That's gonna sound real good in January.
Well, that's why I'm going for a couple weeks next month, because if you can get that work done. So now. Chris, how much overall wealth does Bloom help manage?
So for 25,000 clients that we've got today, we manage just actually this morning. I saw it on the big board. We just crossed $4 billion of assets under management. So
boom.
And it's interesting because if you look at at the robo advisor space, a lot of the names that come out first are like Betterment and Wealthfront. And, Bloom is not terribly behind those companies in terms of assets under management, but we're in flyover country. We're not on the radar. But I like that.
You're on the radar, dude. You have 25,000 clients.
I love that. I love flying under the radar, or not written about as much as some of those other companies that are, in New York or San Fran, but I love the fact that we're growing like we're growing.
Yeah. Hey man, people need good advice. I'm pretty sure that's recession proof.
Yeah. Well, the other thing
the need for good advice.
The other thing I like to say is, do you want somebody managing your entire nest egg? Some 23-year-old in a hoodie at a computer.
I don't know who is that.
Maybe. versus this Bloom is founded by people that have been doing this for quite a while.
Can I point out that you're wearing a hoodie right now?
There is some irony in that.
Yeah, I know.
But I'm 46 though, so I've got
Yeah.
and more gray hair.
Well, that's okay. I just felt like I'm sorry for calling you out. I needed to. I was talking to someone I was having lunch with someone, and he made a comment. He's like, yeah, and they're just sitting around wearing vests and hoodies. I was like, dude, you realize you're wearing a vest and a hoodie right now? And he was like, oh, wow. So, yeah, I mean, what, glass houses?
Touche, yes.
Yeah, hey, that's okay. That's okay. So, for those of you listening, if you're interested in what Bloom does, go check them out. That's BLOOM.com. I think it's cool. I think that you guys are one of Kansas City. You mentioned flying below the radar. I disagree, dude. You're very much on the radar. Why? Man, I see you guys on lists, on stuff. You're one of the more funded companies in Kansas City, especially considering the relatively, I know 6 years for a startup founder, that's like dog years. So that's
Right.
like 47 real people years is like 4 years in a startup.
Right.
Shit'll age you quickly,
It
man.
does.
It really does.
It does.
So the funny thing is I'm 44. I look like I'm 87. What was that thing on Facebook that made you look older?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I want one that makes me look younger.
Right, that's what
I
we
buy
all
into
want.
that. But yeah, so you guys are Bloom is,
Oh, they have that actually. It's called
Makes me look
it's
younger.
called Pictures from Your Past.
oh, yeah. Like the 10-year challenge. Yeah. That's what we should do is the 10-year challenge for do the
startups.
6-month challenge for startups. You mentioned I think it was maybe before we were recording. You're talking
Well-
about one of your co-founders was went from, hey, he had no gray, and now maybe he does.
Well, I know that people can't see. I don't have it with me, but there's a graph. I'll try and explain it because this is so spot on to what we're talking about right now. It's a graph, and it basically graphs kind of the mental state of the typical founder.
Oh,
And,
dude.
The peak is the peak is we have figured this out. We are going to be, the biggest company ever.
And then an hour later, we're going to fail.
So dang it, you ruined the punchline.
Sorry.
So the graph was meant to be the time period you think is over a year. And I say, actually, this graph
Probably a day.
can be in one day. You can go from the highest highs to the lowest lows in one day.
Chris, the whole premise for why Matt Watson and I started the Startup Hustle podcast was to complain about being entrepreneurs. That was literally
you an
the
outlet?
mission statement. Yes, we in episode 1, we're basically we need an outlet. When we also wanted to be realistic. We were actually kind of serious back then too, and then we figured out you know what, just sitting down and talking to people like you and being conversational and kind of getting to the bottom of the ups and the downs.
Yeah.
It's real.
It is.
This is not for the faint of heart.
Yeah.
It's funny. I tell people, oh, I fly too close to the sun. I'm like, if you fly fast enough, you can go right through the middle of it
Right.
and maybe come out all right.
Yes,
That's my
that's
approach.
a good
I
yeah.
also am often found saying things like sometimes you just have to jump and then build wings.
Build the parachute on the way down.
Yeah. I tell people if you're going to jump and build wings, you better make sure you have the stuff to build the wings before you leave the cliff. And that's a good point.
Yeah.
So with that, there's a lot to be said. But yeah, man, you guys I really think you guys are one at Bloom. And once again, BLOOM.com. I had enough O's in there, right? There's 3.
Yeah. It's a blessing and a curse. I think sometimes people, when they hear it once, they tend to remember it, but it gets misspelled a lot.
Yeah.
Fortunately, Google now has indexed it, and I think we come up quite often. And
That's one of the things I actually advise in my book, and I'm not trying to poke at you here, but be careful with the name because you did sentence yourself to a lifetime of saying triple O. I can only imagine how many times you've said 3 O's.
Or how many times we've had to go to the media that's written about us and had
Have
them
it corrected.
Yeah.
What is Bloom? What is 2O's.com?
Well, so for a while it was a live website, and it was like it was bloom.com with 2 O's, and it was like some type of a cosmetic school or something. So it's clear that you were not at a financial services company. But now I don't know if the website's being transitioned. Now it's just it's kind of locked down. It's like an admin login or something that pops up. So it's probably being somebody's probably bought it. And we looked into buying it at the time. It was just it was as you would imagine, Bloom with 2 O's. Normal spelling was a big number to buy. And
I tell a funny story in $1 Million Bedroom because I'm the founder of Gigabook, and people kept saying Gigabooks. And I thought I had a great deal because I got gigabook.com for $500. I was happy about that. And then I realized people were like, hey, man, I'm trying to go to your site and there's nothing at gigabooks.com. And then I had to go buy that for like $2,000.
Yeah.
Which
we had
sucked.
to buy our site for $5,000 for
Yeah.
not even a real word, and it was
but with that, I mean, I thought I had a great deal, and then it wasn't because I hadn't thought that out. And then I also do some other comparisons too, like you remember, Dick's Sporting Goods. It's real easy to go to Dicks.com, and I don't know if you ever accidentally did that. They own the domain now, but let's put it this way: a few years ago, those men were not playing. Yeah. They were not selling sporting equipment.
And think of the price tag they probably had to pay
a
for
lot.
that too. Yeah,
a lot because they were the only people that wanted it
for legit purposes.
And at that point, the people that owned that knew that.
Oh,
and that's
name your price basically.
Well, these are things that you got to consider and think about, and that's like a real thing, and nothing will make you not want to go there other than accidentally bringing up weird male porn in front of your children while you're trying to find
a pair of shoes.
Do they have a sale on this? And you're like, ooh, maybe not on that. Well, anyway, on that subject, hey, this is good advice.
I'm anxious to see how you're going to pivot off of this.
I'm going to pivot right into the outro in the regard that we like to end the episodes of Startup Hustle, which once again was brought to you by Fullscale.io. Build a development team quickly and affordably, and to what we call the Founders Freestyle. So because we're conversational, we sometimes leave things unresolved or want to give you a chance to say anything you might want to say. Could be advice, could be whatever. You can recite the Gettysburg Address if you want. It's a freestyle. So I'll go ahead and turn that over to you, and then I will follow, and we'll call it an episode.
Yeah, well, I think maybe I'll end on a little piece of advice. I'm guessing that a fair number of your listeners are entrepreneurs themselves.
I'm hoping.
Yeah.
I would be surprised if they weren't.
Yeah, and so the wonderful thing about being involved with Bloom is that I think an indicator that you're on to something special is if the company were for some reason to go away, would your clients, your users, your customers be materially worse off if you were not in business? I think that's a very important litmus test, and we feel strongly that the 25,000 people that are using Bloom today as our clients, if Bloom was not available, they would be back to life before Bloom, which was cobbling together their own strategy and likely getting it wrong and likely paying too much in fees that they didn't need to be paying, weren't even aware that they were paying. So I think that's important to keep in mind when you're a founder is, are you working on something that if it wasn't there, your users, clients, customers would be significantly worse off? The other thing I would say is, and obviously Bloom has zero intention of not scaling into the promised land beyond 25,000 clients. We think that we're onto something very special. We think that the timing of this is perfect. More and more people want to interact with their finances in a digital manner and not go to a stuffy conference room with an old school advisor anymore. So we think that the timing of this is perfect. But the other thing I would say is that if what you're working on ends up not working out, will you feel really good about what you tried to do? And this kind of leads into sometimes people that try and start things just for an exit or start things just to make a lot of money. That if it doesn't work out, you really don't get to say, but it didn't work out, but you know what? We were trying to really improve people's lives in a significant way. We weren't necessarily building some cutesy snap crap thing that's adding no value to society. I intentionally call it snap crap.
You don't want to turn yourself into a kitten.
Yeah, and I know that the employees that we have at Bloom today all feel that way. It's that we are making an impact on people's lives. So we may not be around to see it, but there will be people, because they were clients of Bloom, that will be able to stop working sooner than had they not found Bloom. And what's an extra year or two of financial freedom? What's that worth? And we know that we're putting people in a position to have that. And so the advice again is to founders who might be listening to this, or people that are considering becoming a founder, find something that you care deeply about, that if for some reason, because not all startups make it, we know that, if for some reason the company doesn't make it, you can still look back and feel really good about what you tried to do. You can lay your head down on your pillow at night and feel really good about what we tried to build. Could have been a number. You know, there's a number of factors that can lead to a company not make. Could be bad timing. Could be lack of funding, and we could spend another hour talking about reasons why companies don't make it.
We actually have an episode about that. It's why startups fail.
Yeah, yeah.
And we could
sometimes
barely
it's-
scratch the surface.
Yeah, and sometimes it's things that are out of your control too. So if that is the case, please go work on something that you're passionate about, a big enough problem that is worth trying to solve. Not some cutesy thing that might make you a few bucks that you can flip in a couple of years to a buyer. Let it be something that's worth your time and effort, because as we joked about 20, 30 minutes ago, it's rough.
Yeah.
It's really, really hard. And the thing that keeps me going at Bloom is to know that we're doing such important work, and it's not just about a financial reward for founders or employees.
And very well stated. Thank you. One of the things I tell people often is wake up and just try to do something that matters. And if that is your goal and you accomplish it on most days, you'll be all right in the end. I mean, that's there's a whole lot of different ways to go about that, both personally, professionally, and physically. And there are a lot of ways to do things that matter. I think that anytime you can dedicate your passion, your effort, your energy, and your professional life to doing things that. So here's the interesting thing is, and I'm sure you guys have a way to measure the success or whatever, but one of the things that, like, I look at this podcast, and after several hundred episodes and hundreds of thousands of downloads, there's someone somewhere that didn't do something that would have been really frickin' painful. Hopefully, because they heard someone on this, whether it's me, Matt, a guest, anyone, say, oh, wow. And they thought, man, I heard someone talking about that. And that could be a bad idea. Now, the thing is there's no way to ever track that.
Right, yeah.
But theoretically, what we did by recording this and offering that advice and giving people insight changed their life. They might not even know it. We might not even know it. But that's meaningful, and that matters. And like, people ask a lot of questions about this podcast. This takes time. This takes energy. I pay money. This podcast costs me money to produce, but we think that it's meaningful for a number of different reasons. One, it's an outlet for us. Two, we get to say, why wouldn't I want to sit down with you and talk about this? Like, I got an hour a day to do that with all kinds of people, but the output, like you're saying, like, does the output of what you create, is it something that potentially makes people better off, regardless of where that is? And I really like what you guys are doing. I like what you're doing in Kansas City. I like the kind of words you say about Kansas City. But that said, you don't have to be in Kansas City to go to Bloom. That's 3os.com. Get some stuff straightened out and check some stuff out. If you want to check out the Startup Hustle podcast, we are on YouTube. We're on Instagram. We're on TikTok. I've been teaching myself how to. If you want to see a really awesome slow motion shot of Erica Brune from Lever One shooting Matt Watson in the face with a money gun, visit the Startup Hustle TikTok account. I'm still learning with that as you talk. If you own TikTok, sorry for what I'm about to say. It's pretty meaningless. It's right up there with what you mentioned, Snapchat or Snapcrap or whatever. And that's the thing too. Is like if you're trying at your startup. People are, how am I going to attract the talent that I need? When last time we were out in San Francisco, I was asking people that. And I was like, well, how do you find talent? They're like, well, people really in the end want to work on something that they feel is meaningful and is interesting and useful rather than working at Facebook, which will pay more to help people post pictures of what they're having for dinner.
So true.
So, that you have an angle in there, and if you're doing something that matters and it's meaningful, and there's a lot of things on that list that you can tackle, then you're probably in good shape. Well, Chris, once again, thanks for coming in. I really appreciate it.
I enjoyed the conversation. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm gonna end the episode now so I can go sign up for Bloom.
That'd be great.
Yep. See you next time.
Thank you.